is So Many Sequels. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Today on the show, we are going to wrap up rom-com month, February rom-com month. It's coming to an end.
Oh my God. I've loved it so much.
You know, once February ends, it's just romance is dead and we move on to some other things, I guess.
I think I've done this terrible heart for all our video audiences every month, every episode, and I can't get it right anytime. So
yeah,
I hope that they enjoyed my failures, all 4 tries.
There's a good one. That's
okay.
That's a pointy heart.
That's a very, yeah.
We've been doing rom-coms all month. If you've missed any of them, go check those out. SoManySequels.com. We got our links there, as well as links to all our social channels where you should follow us. And of course, if you have been enjoying the show, it'd be really cool if you supported us on Patreon.
Yeah.
SoManySequels.com.
Good stuff, man.
Patreon.com/SoManySequels. Got some cool stuff there for you. You know, if you could throw a buck or 2 or 4 our way, that would be pretty cool. We would like that, and we'll try to make it fun for you too.
Your help makes this podcast better.
Yeah,
that's right.
And it won't take much help to make it that much better.
It doesn't really go into our pockets per se. It helps, us, continue.
It goes right back out.
So better.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to make the best show we can. So patreon.com/SoManySequels. Sign up there. That would be really awesome. But back to today's business. We're doing our final rom-com of the month, which is my pick, which is I Love You, Man. I Love You, Man came out in 2009. It stars Paul Rudd and Jason Segel. So this is a twist on the rom-com. It is a bromcom, bromantic comedy, so to speak. But there is still an actual romance going on in there as well. So it's not just, totally off the chain. But in this movie, we see Paul Rudd, who is getting ready to get married to his fiancée, played by Rashida Jones. But he doesn't have any friends. He's kind of just like, he just hangs out with his wife's friends and he doesn't have any friends of his own. And it makes it kind of weird for him. So he sets out to meet a friend. Hilarity ensues. He meets Jason Segel, who is a wild character, and the bromance forms. So I picked this movie because it's different. I wanted to throw out something a little different than the traditional rom-com. I like that this one has like a focus on male friendship. That's always fun because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of awkwardness that can be at play in male friendships, I think, particularly in the beginning when because men are awkward and weird. And I can say that because we're all men. That is one thing we have in common. So I wanted to throw out something different. So that's why I picked it. What did everybody think of it?
I thought it was a really fun idea as it played out, because I looked at various rom-coms over the month. Who knows what order they came out in?
Who knows?
But they have been. This was a fun sort of twist, a play on the genre. Very much is intact. It follows a lot of the same tropes of a romantic comedy, but it's not about romance really. It's about platonic male friendship. And I think it's an interesting discussion, much like when we talked about What If, and we kind of got into the psychology and sociology of the, can a guy and a girl just be friends? There's a lot you could say about male friendship that doesn't really get discussed in, popular conversation very much. In addition to that, I think it was just a fun movie in general. I think there was a lot to enjoy. I'm gonna be honest, there are some actors out there who are assassins, or comedians who are assassins. They just come in, they hit their mark, and they disappear into the night. For me, one of those assassins is Thomas Lennon. Just every time that guy speaks, it's hilarious. When he's just like, Peter, you have upset me and hurt my heart, and now I'm dying. Like, it's just, I could listen to Thomas Lennon be heartbroken all day because it's just the most hilarious thing ever. So I will definitely circle back around to talking about Thomas Lennon because he was a breath of fresh air for me. But this movie is also like a time capsule of like people before they, not all, some of them were popular when this movie came out. There's a lot of people in here that this was like one of the first things people saw them in. So, including like Rashida Jones. So like there's a real neat, like, oh man, look who that is. Look here, like kind of feeling about this movie. So
yeah, Aziz shows up in there for a second. You've got a bunch of comedians. And honestly, I felt like rewatching this was kind of my, I don't want to say a reintroduction to Paul Rudd, but like the first foray as Paul Rudd as a leading man. He's always, for me, before this, he was always just an incredibly solid, like, side character. Mm-hmm. He had Clueless, but then he kind of faded away, and then he pops up in Friends, and then he kind of faded away, and then he shows up as side pieces and is always really funny. But this really, I feel like, for me anyway, reestablished Paul Rudd as like the main lead. And it, again, showcased Jason Segel in a way that is super funny of this time period. I wish that Jason Segel was still around because he is just incredibly funny. And yeah, every time Paul Rudd spirals into a bumbling confusion of he doesn't know what to say is quite hilarious. And while this isn't a traditional rom-com, I do think that it does also, again, like David mentioned, tell an interesting story of how a lot of times couples can lose their own self-identity because they do feel like they have to be with their significant other all the time. I'm saying this as a single person, but from what I have seen, there's always this line of, especially with men, where when they get older, they don't have as many friends. I feel like there have been several studies lately that have shown like male friendships don't expand past a certain age. And so, they lose that identity and they don't have that outlet for themselves sometimes, men and women. They both need to have their individuality and then be able to come back. And I think this tells a good story of that, in addition to just making male friends, but how a lack of a male friendship can impact your relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we see that happen early on when, when Paul's like, God, I gotta make some fucking friends, I think is the quote.
Yeah.
Because he's just not doing anything he likes. He's doing everything that his wife's friends like. And that works for a while. But, exactly. He hits a point where he's like, man, I got to get some friends. And he finds, a guy he can go do stupid guy stuff with. A lot of it unmentionable, apparently. I don't know what kind of friendship they had. But it was Sydney was a very open book kind of guy.
Yes.
With his man cave and his doesn't give a damn attitude. One of my favorite just visuals is them walking down the boardwalk, and Sydney is wearing Ugg boots, like Hawaiian shorts, and a button-up plaid shirt, and it's like that says it all right there.
Yes, that's
that whole character.
Jason Segel's character of Sydney is kind of like an aggressively single person, like single man, like he's like, there's no girl in his life or person in his life. And he's like not really even care to try.
He took over the Barney Stinson role in this movie.
Yeah. Mixed with like a little bit of like, who's like a slob? Who's I'm trying to think of like a slob character. Yeah. He's like, yeah. So it's interesting because Paul Rudd and Jason Segel really do seem like they would be best friends. Like they just have like a, we say great chemistry all the time, but like it does feel like you look at them, they look like they would get along just great. And the movie works really well when it's the two of them together. And I think it's this is the third time in a row they would end up working together. I think this was the middle movie between Forgetting Sarah Marshall and something else. Knocked Up, maybe. This is like the third time they would be in a movie together, and they just have that great feel to them. And this is probably one of the few times that I'm like, I think like they could have done more. Like it didn't feel like, I kind of was expecting it to be a little bit more like gross and a little bit more like juvenile at times, but they didn't really get that juvenile. I mean, other than the vomiting on Jon Favreau, it didn't really get that bad.
He deserved it, though.
I'll tell you what, though, Jon Favreau, watching him in this movie, he's obviously like the asshole, and it's clear. But there are times where I'm like, Oh yeah, I get it. I get it, John. Yeah, I'm with like when he's like when they're like it's Paul and he's like I don't know who that is and she's like you met him 20 times like I have no idea who that is. I've never met that person.
I feel that. Yeah,
I've been there. I have met people many times that I have like immediately deleted after I have even introduced to them. So I and when he's like standing there, not like just actively not paying attention to Paul, and he's like, "You play piano, right?" And he's like, "No, I don't play piano." You have a piano in your home though. And he's like, decorator, put it there.
Yeah. Jon Favreau's character is like, couldn't be more clear that he does not have any interest in being Peter's friend.
No.
And Peter should stop trying.
This friend search that you're on does not include me.
No, I do not want to be your friend.
So that was pretty funny. Funny.
Yeah, there's we mentioned while watching it, Jon Favreau in 2 of the 4 rom-coms that we chose for this month. He also makes an appearance in Ghost of Girlfriend's Past as also an asshole.
Did he?
Didn't he? Was he not? He was his brother. He was Matthew McConaughey's brother, right?
No. He was Vince Vaughn's brother in 4 Christmases not long ago.
Oh,
I think that might be what you're thinking of.
Past too.
Yeah. That might be what you're thinking of.
Well, darn.
Darn.
But either way, Jon Favreau is always a pleasant surprise. You mentioned Tom Lennon, always hilarious. Yeah, he executes his part in this wonderfully. And I like that they take the typical tropes of a rom-com and throw it into this rom-com situation of all the multiple montage little dates that he's going on. You know, at one point in time, he gets catfished by a person he's really excited to meet. And it turns out to be, Melvin or however, an older man.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh, the picture was taken a couple of years ago or whatever.
Does anybody else like, it's like, you feel bad for Peter, Paul Rudd, who's like trying to genuinely meet a nice, like a young friend and appear his age. Don't you kind of feel a little bit sad for the old guy? Like he's also just like, he's just looking for any level of social interaction. And so you almost want Peter to be like, oh, go ahead, just hang out with him anyway. He's clearly desperate for any attention.
I would have hung out with old Melvin there. Seemed like a nice guy.
I'm so glad he ended up in the bachelor party, in the room party.
Yeah, I also appreciated the whole Lou Ferregno angle. It was quite entertaining just to see him there. He doesn't physically act much anymore, so he's always a pleasant surprise because he can be really funny, especially in a situation like this. Like it makes sense to have him here, kind of like Mike Tyson in The Hangover, just this over-the-top situation somehow makes sense in this weird world that they've created.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I've actually met Lou Ferrigno, and it was a pretty exciting experience. I said basically nothing. He shook my hand, and it felt like shaking the hand of a large boulder.
Did it wrap around like did it just like,
I mean, like, yeah, it was like, I shook his hand and like his whole hand was I was like, oh, and he he looked at me, he went, how you doing? And I was like, I'm good. Yeah. he said, you're looking good. And then he left.
You're looking good.
I'm looking good. The thing is, the second that I made eye contact with him and he said, how you doing? My armpits went like sweat, just like immediate. I was like, it was the most intimidating and exciting moment I think I've ever had live.
Challenged him to an arm wrestling match.
And that was when I worked in radio. So it wasn't like at like a con or anything. He like came in to do an interview. It was pretty cool. And so it was cool to see him again here. My good friend, Lou Ferrigno.
Friend of the podcast, Lou Ferrigno.
Friend of the pod.
Exactly. Exactly. But I mean, like, you could go down you could literally pull up the cast list and just go down. J.K. Simmons, hilarious in this. Harold Mandukas, Andy Samberg, Jamie Presley. Like, everybody in this is just as solid as they could be,
Especially for the time frame. I mean, a lot of those people, this is like, they're like Andy Samberg is big and J.K. Simmons is recognizable. Like it's a good time for this cast as well. Mm-hmm. It's 2009?
Yep.
Yeah. I'm looking through the cast list now, and some of the ones we missed. You got Jane Curtin. She's a legend. Mm-hmm. You got Nick Kroll.
Nick Kroll
in there. You got
as not a douche.
as not a douche. You got Joe Latruglio, who would go on to star in Brooklyn Nine-Nine with Andy Samberg.
Right.
And then I didn't even notice this, but the cast list says that the wedding band was OK Go.
Yeah, I missed that too.
Oh man,
I thought you were going to say Rob. I thought you were going to say Rob Hubel.
They played the band "It Tastes Like Chicken."
Wow,
I have to rewatch the ending of that again. Oh, and then you got Larry Wilmore as the minister as well.
Yeah, Larry Wilmore.
A lot of people are just like sprinkled in there.
And David Krumholtz, Bernard himself, Santa Claus.
He was Sydney. He was.
He didn't even have a name. He was just one of Sydney's friends.
One of the guys who was Sydney's friends was also one of the IT techs in the office. I know he's probably done a bunch of other things too, but I just remember him as being the really tall IT tech who flipped everybody off when he left.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
a lot of great people in there.
There's so many like quotable moments from this. Are there any that stand out? Like for me, the one that stands out the most is Totes McGhost is one that I have always said since this movie.
I wondered if this movie was the origin of Totes
outlandish.
It's a huge.
I believe that it was. I think Totes McGhost came from this. I'd never heard it before. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but this is the first time I heard it. But there were so many more that popped up that I had forgotten about, so I didn't know if there were any that you all remember that stood out.
We would be remiss to not mention Slap at a Bass.
You gotta say Slap at a Bass. That's like the biggest one from the movie. But then one of my low-key favorites is Later on the Minjay. Makes no sense.
What did I just say?
Later's on the Minjay.
He called him Jobin at one point.
Jobin.
Like I said, so the movie was funny. I didn't find it to be crack up funny all the time. It was it had a very subtle humor a lot. I laughed a lot when it was Tom Lennon and him and they were like Chi-Town, Windy City and all that, right? And then when he comes back in and he's giving that little monologue about it takes a special kind of person to go out and not call. And then he go and I was like, he left. And then he was gone for like maybe a minute and 10 seconds. And then Thomas Lennon one more time with a drive-by. You're a whore, Peter.
Yes.
That in there. And I just laughed out loud at like 2 a.m. Just, you're a whore, Peter. That with me was so funny. I don't know if it's a quotable moment, but I'll remember it.
They have a little bro back and forth with Bro Montana.
Yeah.
Broseph Goebbels. It's not
that one's kind of weird. I laughed at that one just because that one was so whoa.
Yeah, that one's rough. Yeah. There's a lot of great catchphrases in this movie.
Do we want to talk about at this point the subject matter of male friendship as adults? How hard it would be right now. Go out and make a new, male adult friend who's your age right now. How difficult that feels like it would be.
Don't even want to. I don't even want to.
I know what you mean. I
knew you would.
I was not a sociology major, but I remember taking intro to sociology. And one of the few things I remembered was they talked about gender norms in relationships. And one thing that they established, or that a study established, was that women establish friendships through similar interests and through previous relationships. So if a girl is a friend of a friend, and it's easier to develop that friendship and stay friends. And there's constant communication. Whereas men establish friendships through activities. And once those activities start to go away, the friendship becomes harder for the two men to maintain. Very similar, anecdotally, we can talk to that a little bit because Josh and I, we met doing theater in college. Garrett, you and I met doing radio in college, and Josh and Garrett likewise. And we met a lot of other men when we were in those activities, and the friendships with some of them have gotten harder to maintain over time. We've managed to keep ourselves together through this podcast. That's our regular activity that's helped to, keep our friendships together. And if we stop doing it, I don't know. Who's to say how we would have a harder time is what the study suggests.
Nah.
But that's the difficulty. And that's why it's so hard for Paul Rudd in this situation. Cause it's like, you can't just walk up to a guy and go, hey, want to be friends? Just weird. The other guy would be like, no. And imagine somebody walking up to you and saying, hey, you want to be friends?
No.
No, I'm
Probably
good.
not.
I'm good. It's strange. What do you guys think?
I think it's just that way in general I think a lot of adults, like, meeting new people outside of a work setting is just difficult for a lot of people. Especially with we've been in a pandemic for 2 years, and a lot of people who are just getting back into socializing with strangers. People are out of practice in some way, shape, or form. It feels like, even if they have been close and like not necessarily following as many guidelines as we had. But I still feel like it is just really difficult, especially now coming out of all of this, where people have been isolated for so long, to start things like that.
I think, David, you talked about this study you read, and it makes sense. But I think that the fault really lies on men for needing an activity to keep your relationship, to keep your friendship going. That's ridiculous, honestly.
It's also a lot of societal expectations and norms and media like that, what you see in movies of men not having, feeling, not being able to express emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
For so long has been, deterred. Like
you said, like you're saying here, Josh, like there's and Garrett, there's sort of a subconscious expectation, and sometimes it's a conscious one, of it's okay for women to be intimate as friends. They can talk and share things. Whereas men, there's this kind of expectation of keep it surface level, don't get, men don't get that intimate with their relationships, and they keep it. That's why, a lot of male friendships start out of sports or out of work or shared activities. And
because if you're not doing an activity, you don't have time to talk about your feelings.
You don't, if you gotta do your other thing, and I'm sure, if you looked at the long scale of time, you could look at situations where, today we have much more freedom to have friends outside of things. But like when kids were growing up in the 30s and 40s, it's like you didn't really have time for friends because you were working all day. Maybe you got to go to school, and then you came home and you went right to work for whatever with whatever your family needed, chores and stuff. And so like over time, this idea of developing friends just became sort of something new, and there's not enough data. But like, it is on you after a while. Once you make that realization that, hey, I don't have any friends, you kind of have to put it on yourself. Like, I need to reconnect with people, because I think we all need to connect with people in some way.
Well, and you look at it from Jason Segel's perspective in this movie, Sydney. He is someone who his friend group has developed, significant relationships with couples, and he has not. And he is that steadfast single person. And so those relationships have changed. And so for him, it is how do I continue those kinds of relationships? Because like he doesn't see those friends as often. He's making his phone calls to all of those people, and you hear how those relationships have changed, where like certain kids think that he is creepy, and everybody's trying to do their things, and he's saying, no, come back to the things that we used to do. And he is stuck in his own ways, unable to see that things have changed, and that he too has to change. At some point in time, you also have to take ownership of how you're projecting and presenting yourself, and realize, hey, things around me are changing. I also need to look at how I am acting and grow along with these people who are growing if I want them around. Or I stay here in my man cave and watch everybody pass me by.
Because it's one thing to be single and happy, and single and like, know yourself, as people might say today. But there's clearly an element that as we dig more into Sydney through the movie, where it's more a situation where he's kind of stunted. Like he's kind of, while his other friends have, it's not even necessarily that they have moved on with couples and stuff, but they have grown up in their responsibilities with other things. And he's sort of stuck in this sort of shiftless role where he might be good at his job, and he might be a good friend to have, but he he doesn't challenge himself anymore. He's stuck grifting off of free, open houses and stuff. That's kind of the difference there, is if he, it's okay to, it's not saying like, oh, you have to be in a relationship to mature, but you have to find a way to continue maturing. Otherwise, it is going to be hard for people who have all these responsibilities to shirk them. Just, you know what I mean? I'm trying to make up a thesis on the fly here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the movie could have easily taken a turn that would have bothered me with Sydney, and that would be having the lesson for him be to go along with what societal pressure says to do. I would have not liked it as much if his lesson was to be, well, you got to go find a wife. That's such old thinking, and it doesn't matter. That's not what he needs to do. I don't even know what he needs to do, really.
He just needs to grow up a little bit. At some point, like, there's nothing wrong with having your man cave and your whole situation, but he is like overtly flaunting of it. And perhaps you rein that in a little bit and, grow along with certain things. You can be your expressive self without being gross. And he was gross.
It's like the Jungle Book. He's Baloo, he's like, hey, life gives you the things and you just take them and, shift, any of society's responsibilities and stuff. Like, he's very like, he's a bum for lack of a better word. Like, if anything, it's just taking responsibility, having a bit more, pride in his work, maybe. Cause he says he's an investor. I don't know if we ever see him do anything in terms of that really in the movie other than buy billboards.
No,
but they're a good balance for one another because, Peter doesn't have that assertive side, and he finds that through that friendship with Sydney. And Sydney does need to be grown. He needs to be brought.
It's just the odd couple, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
It's just the odd couple.
Yeah,
but Sydney is a lot better than Oscar.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
He's at least a little bit more likable than Oscar.
Oh, so much more. So much more. Yeah. It's definitely interesting because it's gonna depend on how just how any individual audience member feels, because Sydney doesn't really change in the end. He doesn't have like this big changing moment. He's still the same old guy at the end.
Mm-hmm.
They just kind of learn to accept him for who he is, and he learns to accept his new friends for who they are, I think.
Yeah.
Which is good, because, it would be like if people had to change to be their friends.
No, the movie sort of ends before, like, it ends kind of abruptly, really, after the title drop. And it's he doesn't necessarily have to change, but he does kind of learn that he made a mistake in his own way.
That's what I'm saying. He's learning to how to deal, to deal with, but how to work with other people, because him, telling Peter's whole family about Peter and Rashida Jones's bedroom secrets, maybe not the right way to tell that. And he learns that throughout the movie without having to change who he is. And that's what makes it cool.
It is, there was only one real story complaint that I had, and it's that I thought that eventually Rashida, who pushed this on him, or not Rashida, but Zoe, the character, pushed on him this idea a little bit. If he doesn't have any friends, and maybe he should try to make some, right? And then, of course, she ends up becoming somewhat insecure, intimidated, whatever you want to say, about their friendship. And I thought that the sticking point, which was sort of how they were acting, kind of ditching a date to hang out with him, and this situation of asking why they're getting married, I thought that was kind of, honestly, it's the borrowing $8,000 when you're trying to pay for a wedding that I was like, that would be the big one. That would be what would get you actually in trouble.
The big dumb mistake.
That didn't really seem like her focus. And so I was kind of like, oh, but when it doesn't really matter in the long run, but was a weird point for me. I was like, the $8,000, that's a big deal.
Yeah. And I like how they handle the relationship dynamics too, because when friction starts to exist between, when Peter feels like Sydney is pulling him one way, and why can I never remember Rashida's name? Zoe's pulling him the other way. The reactions are all pretty reasonable. They're not over the top. They're leveled, and they're what they probably should be. They have a little Zoe and Peter have a moment where they, have an argument that they can't solve. And it leads to them having to take a step back for a few days. But it's also like resolved level-headedly. They all handle it reasonably, and no one is like a bad guy in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
No one is wrong for what they did. They just make mistakes that are then easily remedied as they should be.
Well, and it's always good when you're in a real sort of loving, caring relationship when there's sort of a willingness to accept apologies.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get in a situation where they just like, no, you really need to make this up to me. And a good relationship isn't about making things up necessarily. It's just about being honest and about, saying, apologizing, and the person on the other side being willing to, accept that apology.
Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, we are reaching the end of our show. So let's go ahead and wrap this up real quick because otherwise we could talk philosophy of interpersonal relationships all day.
Oh yes. I mean, that's the best part about this particular run that we've done.
Yeah.
I'll give you a brief box office rundown. So this movie opened March 20th of 2009, just after my 19th birthday, just before Josh's. Garrett was long 19 by this point. And it opened in the number 2 spot with 17.8 million. Never quite reached number 1, according to what I'm looking at here. It opened against Nick Cage's Knowing. You remember this movie?
Oh, I do remember that. Yes, I do.
It had like a melting planet on the poster.
Yeah, it sucked.
It was like a premonition kind of movie.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, that opened at 24 million. I Love You Man was in the number 2 spot. Duplicity, starring Julia Roberts and Clive Owen, I believe, was in number 3 with 13.9. Number 4, Race to Witch Mountain, the infamous meme with The Rock looking back in the back seat. And then number 5, in its 3rd week, you had Watchmen. We were just in 2009, and I Love You Man for the whole year of 2009 finished in the number 47 spot with 71.4 million. That's a full 9 spots ahead of Ghosts of Girlfriends Past, which finished at number 58 that year. So we were just in 2009. Go watch Ghosts of Girlfriends Past. Because we talked about that one too. I'm glad I suggested that one because I think we covered it all this month. We had bad-ish, good-ish, and classic-ish. We had it all. I won't go through 2009. It's Avatar. You all know that.
Yeah.
Avatar is number 1 movie of 2009. So there you go. That's it for the box office stats. So Letterboxd we go.
Okay, well, we'll start off with just a few reviews here, see what the temperature is. We've got the most popular review on Letterboxd is a 4-star review that says, "This is the gayest straight movie I've ever seen." Mm-hmm. We've got Jason Segel was just the manic pixie dream bro.
Yes.
Awkward phone calls are my own personal brand of horror movie. That's a 3-star review.
Yes, that's true.
And this 4-star review just says Jobin.
Yep.
And then a few negative reviews to keep it fair. Painful. Segel always gets cast as an eccentric, self-righteous bro who plays by his own rules, and it's always hard to watch. A strangely executed fever dream, 0.5-star. And yes, one of the peak "you're a Gen X person and you're getting old" movies.
There you go.
So, with those reviews in mind, what do we think the community thought? Where does it average out at?
I'm gonna guess that it averages out at 3.3.
Oh man, that's what I was gonna say, David. Well, you know what? 3.
3. I haven't seen it yet, so I'm gonna guess 2. I'm gonna split it, I guess, and go 3.1. That really won't do me any good, but let's see here. The average review on I Love You Man is, oh boy, we got a dead ringer here. We got a hole in one. We got a swoosh with David. 3.3.
3.3.
Perfect 3.3 on Letterboxd. That's exciting.
It is exciting. That puts me in the lead.
All right. Well, before we peace out, what do we rate the movie?
I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Yeah, same here. It totes my goats every time. 3.5.
I will also give it a 3.5. So there you go. We don't have.
I haven't looked in terms of the production. It felt like a lot of the humor was improv.
Wouldn't surprise me. A lot of improv comics.
And a lot of times improv movies are really fun in the moment when you're having it, but a lot of times it can lead to there not being that sense of like completeness in this. I think in the dialogue, like you can set up good long-term jokes when you've written ahead. So sometimes, it is funny. It wasn't as funny as I thought. I
imagine some of the weird things Paul Rudd says, those might be improv. I would bet it. I can imagine it's hard to write laters on the Minjay.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's not a Jason Segel project if his Andre the Giant impression doesn't sneak in there somewhere.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want us to get cut off, so wrap this up. We'll be back next week with more movies outside of rom-com for once. So find us online at SoManySequels.com and be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.
Jobin.